Hi guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today we're going to be looking at everything that I read in August. Was that the last month? Yes, August. So, August, is it actually January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September? Yes, it was August. So I had my TBR, which I had set in August, and I was really excited for, but I didn't get around to reading everything. No surprises there, but I got really just bogged down by the book that I thought I was going to get bogged down by. So I ended up reading a total of 5 books in August, and yeah, I think only 3 of them were actually off my TBR, which is like, yeah, slightly disappointing because there were 2 books I didn't get around to that I really wanted to read, but alas, what can one do? One thing I have decided, which I will refresh and go over in my next TBR video, is I've decided what I'm going to do with the books that I don't get around to reading. I had been considering whether I like set them aside and give myself like a December TBR, so I've got like a, I don't know, like a catchment, December being the month where I read everything I didn't read in the year, but I figured that if that means there's just 1 book from every month for the rest of the year that I don't read, that's 11 books, and we know I'm not going to read 11 books, so I decided that was a bad idea, and instead I am actually going to be putting them back into the jar and make them a priority, which means that when I pick them the second time, like the next time they get pulled out of the jar, I have to read those first so that I get around to reading them. I think that's probably the most diplomatic and sensible way I can go about it. But let's just dive into the books that I read. So the first book that I finished in August was Homegoing by Yazi. I have done a full video review of this, so if you want to see and hear my full thoughts on this, then click the card above so that you can go and have a listen, but this was just incredible. So this is historical fiction. It's a very topical and important topic that we're looking at with the history of slavery and sort of how that has impacted descendants. It follows 2 sisters, one who is a slave trade wife and one who becomes a slave, and it looks at how those slightly different, well, those different circumstances have impacted the like several generations of their children and how that sort of changed the course of their lives and their descendants' lives. It's very, very interesting. It's really powerful. I read this in about 2 days. One day, I just couldn't put it down. I was really surprised because I knew this was going to be good, but I wasn't anticipating that I was going to absolutely fly through it like I did. So this was a 5-star read and it's got onto my all-time favorites list, and I think this is one of 3 books in 2020 that has made that list so far. So absolutely super duper pleased with this one, and Giassi has another book coming out this month in September, which I'm really looking forward to picking up as well. So the next book that I then picked up was actually an ARC, which I got after I picked my TBR for August, and that was The Happiest Man on Earth by Eddie Jaku. So this it's an historical memoir, and historical memoir aren't all memoirs historical, but it's about this man Eddie Jaku, and it's his experience as a Holocaust survivor. It's quite a short little memoir. It's been promoted a lot around Father's Day for those in the world who celebrate Father's Day, because I think Father's Day is actually celebrated earlier in the year in the Northern Hemisphere. Well, anyway, if you're in Australia, this has been promoted heavily for Father's Day, which is coming up, or has just been. It's actually will have just been as this video has gone up. But anyway, that's a tangent. I loved this. Again, I read this in about 1 or 2 days. This was just such a beautiful, honest and heartfelt memoir about his story. It's all about finding happiness and choosing happiness and sort of about how to make the right decision rather than making the easy decision. It's obviously quite sad in parts, considering that we're talking about the Holocaust, but on the whole, I just absolutely loved this. I thought this was just absolutely brilliant, and I can't recommend that you go and pick this up enough. So thank you very much to Pam McMillan, who sent me a copy for this in exchange for a review. I have a full review up on my blog for this one, so if you want to read some more of my thoughts, then make sure you head over to ozbooksnow.com to read that review. I don't think I'll be doing a full video review of this one, but this was a massive thumbs up for me. Again, a 5-star read. So then I moved on to Furyborn by Claire Legrand. I was super excited to pick this up and I flew through this. I was actually really surprised. I thought this might take me a bit of time to get through it, seeing as it's a big fantasy novel, and I was a little bit intimidated by it, but it, again, I think only took me a handful of days. So you're probably sitting there going, well, why have you only read 5 books in August, Kirsty, if this is the pace that I was going at? I really was just like pumping books out at the start of the month. I was so excited to see how many books I would get to, but don't you worry, the pitfall's coming. But this was incredible. I think this was a 4.5 out of 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed the world, but this is very much so a book that is setting you up for the next part of the story that's coming in the second book. I think this is just is this a duology or a trilogy? I am unsure, but I really loved it, but there is a lot that happens, but in the same sentence it almost seems like there's not a lot that happens in this book. There's a lot of character development, and there's, yeah, a lot of scene setting and explanations of how the magic system works. The book is written in like a dual perspective, so there's one character and another character, and they are 1,000 years apart in history, and that was an interesting choice. I found it a little bit confusing. That was probably my only critique of the book, was that the 1,000-year time span gap didn't feel like 1,000 years. They could have been set in the same year, and because I couldn't feel that, and you kind of start at the end and then the book works its way through to the point, like the first chapter that you started with comes back to that point, so you kind of know what you're building towards. In a way, nothing spoilery, but yeah, I don't know, I think the timeline of the book, I still don't feel I fully got my head wrapped around, so I am really looking forward to reading the second one to kind of solidify that. It's one of those books where I really enjoyed getting set into the world so that I can just embrace all of the action that I'm sure is going to come in. I think Kingsbane is the sequel to this one, so really good, but go in with an open mind as to just the structure of how this book is told. But yeah, I couldn't put this down, this was so good. So then I moved on to Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the illustrated edition, which I received at Christmas time, so I apologise for talking about Harry Potter, but I do love the books. I don't support J.K. Rowling's views, but I really enjoyed reading this. I find it really fascinating every time I reread this series, even though I've read it quite a few times now, how much I forget, and how, like, how much the book matures come book 4, because even in book 3 it's still just that sort of juvenile Harry Potter, and then you hit book 4 and the way that it ends when Voldemort's sort of back in the scene and you're like, man, this is really hard hitting. So I really enjoyed this, and I was actually really impressed with myself with how quickly I read this, because in my mind I was thinking, oh, it's an illustrated edition, it's actually quite a quick book. I forgot that the Goblet of Fire is actually a massive book, and considering that this is this wide but still this long, it didn't click to me until I was like powering through it that I was reading like a 700-page book like that. I mean, no surprises because it's Harry Potter, but I was feeling really on top of my game at this point. I had powered through 2 historical books. I had then got through a big fantasy and then another big fantasy. I was like, nothing can defeat my reading in August. I am going to read 10 books. I'm going to read my entire bookshelf. Nothing can stop me. And then I picked up The God of Small Things and I was defeated for the rest of the month, so never mind. I had predicted that The God of Small Things, which I can't even be bothered picking up to show you, was going to tank my reading, and it did. And I was a bit on the fence about actually DNFing it, because my rule was you read 50 pages and if you don't like it, you put it down. And I hit 20 pages and was like, I could take this or leave this. And then I was like, no, I'll get to 50 pages so that I hit the rule and then I can put it down. But I got really conflicted in myself. I was like, is it because the book is not what I want it to be, or is it because I'd already like predetermined that I wasn't gonna love it? But in any case, it meant that for like a week and a bit, I just didn't pick up a book. I was sort of reading an audiobook but for the most part, I just was not interested in reading because I wasn't interested in picking up the book. There was nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It has really beautiful writing, but I was put off by a lot of the reviews saying that the story doesn't, it's like it's not about the story, it's about the writing, and I was like, I just wasn't invested. I just couldn't get interested in the characters, especially because they're written in a way that's very distant, like they don't seem to have a lot of emotions. They're sort of these two-dimensional characters that are supposed to be really deep, but I was just bored. I was just bored of the book and I didn't want to pick it up, so maybe Man Booker books are just too highbrow for fiction for me when I'm in such a fantasy binging mode. But yeah, that really got me good, so that just tanked me, and then I went, no, you know what, if I'm not picking it up to read, I don't want to read it. So I said, that's enough, and I DNF'd it, and I moved on to my next books, and then I just sort of got into a muddle because I hadn't finished a book for ages, and I really just slowed down, which sucked because it meant I only finished one more book in the month, and that was The Black Prism by Brent Weeks, which was really satisfying to finish because I have been listening to this on audiobook for over a month, if not close to 2 months at this point. This is quite a long book. If you're not familiar with it, this is a high fantasy, actually it's more of an epic fantasy novel is how it comes across by Brent Weeks, who is quite well known for this story, and it's something I've been wanting to read for years. I saw Reagan at Peru's Project read this many years ago. In fact, I think she's still making her way through the series, and I was really interested with the way that she described it. This is a very unique magic system. It's all about the color spectrum, so different people can draw on different colors that creates different kinds of magic and powers, and some people can draw more than one color, and then you have like the Prism, who is the Emperor, and he can draw from every color. And there's all sorts of politics and intrigue going on. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I keep meaning to check if the guy who narrates this also narrated Dune, which is another like classic fantasy sci-fi novel, because it was really similar. But in any case, I really liked the guy who did the audiobook narration for this, but I think I kept trying to read this or listen to it whilst I was driving in the car or doing things that also required a little bit of presence of mind, and this book I probably needed to do when I was sewing or walking, when I could fully dedicate my attention to the actual book itself. So I struggled to kind of multitask whilst listening to this, which is why it took me such a long time to get through it, but I loved it. I'm going to keep reading this on audiobook because I don't think I'll get to the books, or at least I don't think I'll get through them if I'm reading them in the physical format, and I think they do only get bigger. So this was quite a long read, but I absolutely loved it. I think I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait to see where the series goes. It is truly unlike any other fantasy I've ever read. There are so many plot twists and other twisty elements in it that are just wonderful and delightfully horrifying, and so many of the characters have secret agendas. People are not who they say they are. I just loved this. There's just so much to unpack in this book. So if you haven't heard of this or you haven't read it but you're thinking about it, it is worth it. It is worth every page. I enjoyed so much how long this book was. It was super enjoyable. But that was the last book that I got around to. So unfortunately I only clocked in with 5 books for August, which isn't an awful number considering I'm aiming to read 6. But I'm more disappointed that I didn't get around to reading Between Shades of Grey or A Jigsaw of Fire and Stars, because I was really looking forward to both of them, but I simply ran out of time. I started reading The Unspoken Name, which was also on my TBR, but that one took me a lot longer to read than I thought it would. I'm actually still making my way through it, but it has set me up well for the beginning of September because I'm now like at the end of several books that I'm gonna finish soon. So let's hope I have more success in September. If you haven't seen my TBR video, then make sure you go and check that out. You can kind of see like a sneak preview behind of some of the books I'm planning on reading. I have added another book to that, so even if you have read, sorry, not read, so if you have watched that video, I am also going to try and read Serpent and Dove. I know, it's stupidly ambitious because I'm still finishing other books. I haven't even started that TBR. I'm not going to finish it. I know I'm not, but I'm going to try, and we're going to have faith, and who knows, maybe I'll come back to you at the end of September having read like 15 books. Wouldn't that be amazing? Where this puts me with my reading goal, I'm currently sitting at 39 books out of 65. I lowered it. I finally lowered it. And guess what? I'm still like 4 books behind, which is depressing. I refuse to finish 2020 on anything less than 60 books. I will at least read 60 books, but I'm hoping for 65. So I'm not doing super well on my reading goals. I struggled in August because I was actually sick for 3 out of the 4 weeks in August with tonsillitis. We were very lucky with the filming schedule. I had recurrent tonsillitis. I got sick 3 separate times and it took me on the whole about 3 weeks to recover, but I managed to squeeze in some filming for all the videos you've been watching on like the few days that I was healthy. So I'm pleased that I kept up with filming, but it did mean that I was actually so unwell. I also didn't really feel like reading, so perhaps I should be a little bit more forgiving of myself that I didn't get around to a few books because I was out of action for a long time and uni has started back up again. So I think we'll be looking forward into the next month. I have really high hopes because I'm really enjoying everything that I'm reading. I'm seriously into my fantasies right now. All I want to do is read gigantic fantasy books. I have never been in this mood before. I feel like I have reached like the reader's equivalent of runners who reach that happy zone when they're running, when they've run so far, they could just keep running. I feel like I'm there, but in the reading world, I've just read so much fantasy that I could read all of Game of Thrones and be totally happy with it. I'm sitting on this feeling very happily, and I'm going to just plow through and keep reading big fantasies until I run out of steam, because I think I did a pretty good job in August. Like, I think if we actually tallied up my page count, you know what, for future me, when I'm editing this, I'm going to put my page count for August right here, just so that we can appreciate that in 5 books, this was my page count. I really hope that that's an impressive number, otherwise this is a bit awkward, but you know what, I read like 3 or 4 big books and I'm pleased with that. So anyway, let's wrap this up. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books and if you liked them, and let me know what you're planning on reading in September. I'd love to know, but other than that, I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.